The first whispers started in Hollywood like wildfire. A single email, sent in confidence, or so Meghan Markle thought, was about to upend one of the most high-profile galas of the year. The L'Oréal Paris 20th Anniversary Women of Worth Gala, a glittering, star-studded celebration, was the kind of event where Hollywood power players flexed their influence, showed off their best selves, and quietly marked alliances that could shape careers for years. It was exclusive. It was untouchable. And Meghan Markle wanted in. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But this wasn't just any gala. This was a carefully curated social ecosystem where gatekeepers held all the power, and Kris Jenner was arguably the most formidable among them. Known for her ruthless sense of timing, impeccable social radar, and an uncanny ability to control the narrative, Kris wasn't someone who simply let anyone waltz in on her watch. She didn't just attend these events. She practically wrote the rules of engagement for who was allowed to step into the spotlight. And yet, Meghan, a former royal-turned-Hollywood celebrity, believed her email request would be enough. It was simple, polite, direct. A professional note expressing interest in attending, perfectly reasonable by most standards. But in Hollywood, reasonable isn't always relevant. Context matters. Influence matters. Reputation matters more than even etiquette, and Meghan was about to discover that one misstep in this glittering, hyper-competitive world could cascade into something far bigger than she imagined. So why did Kris Jenner trash that email? The question alone is enough to raise eyebrows. On paper, Meghan's email wasn't aggressive. It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't even particularly audacious. It was merely a polite request to attend one of the most exclusive events of the year. And yet, when it hit Kris's inbox, it was treated not as a simple ask, but as a provocation. The reasons are layered, tangled in Hollywood's politics, celebrity rivalries, and perhaps an unspoken tension between royal pedigree and reality TV royalty. Imagine being in Meghan's shoes for a moment. You've spent years carefully curating your public persona, balancing royal protocols with the demands of Hollywood life. You've experienced media scrutiny, tabloid narratives, and the constant pressure to maintain a polished image. Now, armed with a single, seemingly innocuous email, you believe you can secure entry to an A-list gala. You don't yet know that the response will not only deny your request, but will become a public spectacle, amplified by social media, insiders, and gossip-hungry journalists. The story of this email is not just about rejection. It's about power. It's about influence. It's about understanding the subtle hierarchies that dictate who belongs in certain social circles and who doesn't. Kris Jenner operates in a world where every decision is calculated, every reaction is strategic, and every slight, even the tiniest, can be leveraged into a display of authority. And Meghan, despite her fame and her history, was about to learn this lesson in the most public of ways. What makes this tale especially fascinating is the timing. The L'Oréal Paris Women of Worth Gala isn't just a glamorous affair, it's a milestone event. Celebrating 2 decades of women who have changed the world, it's a gathering of philanthropists, Hollywood legends, and high-powered influencers. Attendance signals status. It signals approval from some of the most influential figures in entertainment and business. Being excluded, therefore, sends its own powerful message, a subtle but undeniable mark of disfavor. And in a world obsessed with perception, image, and influence, that mark can resonate far beyond the walls of the gala itself. So, when Kris Jenner trashed Meghan's email request, it wasn't merely a personal slight. It was a strategic move, a statement, and perhaps even a warning. And what happened next would ripple across social media feeds, gossip columns, and celebrity circles in ways few could have predicted. But this story isn't just about the collision of 2 powerful women in Hollywood. It's also about the mechanics of celebrity culture, how one misjudged email can become a public spectacle, how insider knowledge and alliances shape perception, and how even the most carefully crafted personas are vulnerable to scrutiny. In the moments after Kris's rejection, whispers began to circulate. Some claimed it was a power play. Others suggested personal dislike. A few even speculated that there were larger, hidden motives at work, motives that involved social clout, competition for influence, and the subtle hierarchies of Hollywood's elite. The drama was only beginning. By the time Meghan realized the implications, the narrative had already taken on a life of its own. Leaks emerged. Social media posts hinted at conflict. Gossip blogs ran wild with speculation, some framing Meghan as entitled, others portraying Kris as ruthlessly protective of her domain. And somewhere in the middle, the public watched, captivated by a story that combined royalty, celebrity, power, and ambition in a uniquely Hollywood cocktail. Think about it for a moment. How often do we see something as simple as an email spark such a maelstrom? In most cases, an email is nothing more than a message, a few lines of text. But when that email lands in the hands of someone like Kris Jenner, it's no longer just an email. It's a challenge, a potential threat, and a chance to assert dominance. And Kris didn't miss the opportunity. She acted quickly, decisively, and in a way that left Meghan, and everyone following the story, stunned. The first ripple was subtle. Internally, Kris's team likely circulated the email, dissecting it, evaluating the tone, considering how to respond. Was it a genuine request? Was it an attempt to insert oneself into an exclusive circle? Was it a strategic maneuver by someone accustomed to operating in royal and celebrity circles? These were questions that didn't take long to answer. The consensus: Meghan Markle's request was audacious. Perhaps harmless on the surface, but in the context of Hollywood power dynamics, it was enough to trigger a decisive reaction. And then came the moment that would define the night, and perhaps the year. The rejection wasn't polite. It wasn't sugar-coated. It was deliberate, sharp, and calculated. To Meghan, it must have felt like a sudden, jarring collision with a reality she hadn't fully anticipated. To Kris, it was simply another exercise in the art of control. A demonstration that she dictated who entered her world, on her terms, and at her discretion. But the fallout extended far beyond the email itself. In the hours and days that followed, the story unfolded in real time. Gossip columns dissected every possible angle. Celebrity insiders whispered about behind-the-scenes tension. Social media erupted with commentary, memes, and speculation. Some celebrated Kris's decisiveness. Others sympathized with Meghan's apparent rejection. The story became a microcosm of Hollywood's obsession with power, influence, and perception, an elegant, chaotic dance in which every move carries weight, and every misstep is magnified. And yet, despite all this, the story still had twists waiting to be revealed. What we know about Kris Jenner's rejection is only the beginning. Behind the public narrative lies a complex web of motives, strategies, and consequences. Stories that few outside the inner circles of Hollywood will ever fully understand. There are layers of ambition, rivalry, and social signaling that complicate what might otherwise seem like a simple act of refusal. So, as we begin this journey, ask yourself, what would you do if you were Meghan Markle? If a single email could determine your access to an elite circle, your public perception, and the trajectory of your social influence, how would you handle it? And more importantly, what would happen if the gatekeeper you were trying to impress was someone like Kris Jenner, someone who understands influence better than almost anyone on the planet and wields it without hesitation? By the end of this story, you'll see not just what happened that night, but why it happened, and how a single decision can reverberate through the worlds of Hollywood and celebrity culture. You'll witness ambition clash with strategy, perception collide with reality, and the raw mechanics of influence laid bare. And just when you think the drama has reached its peak, the next chapter reveals a twist nobody saw coming. A move, a reaction, a revelation that will shift the entire narrative. And it all starts with a single email. It all began with a quiet moment in Meghan Markle's life. A moment that seemed ordinary on the surface, but would soon ignite a wildfire in Hollywood. She sat at her sleek, modern desk in her Los Angeles home, laptop open, a cup of herbal tea cooling beside her. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting lines across her polished workspace. On the screen was a blank email, and in her mind was a thought that seemed simple enough. She wanted to attend the L'Oréal Paris 20th Anniversary Women of Worth Gala. To most, an email is just an email. A string of words, an introduction, a polite ask. But in Meghan's world, every gesture, every communication, carried layers of meaning. She had spent years learning to navigate public perception, to anticipate how journalists and critics might interpret her every move. And yet, this email felt different. It felt like a bridge. A way to step into an elite circle she hadn't yet fully penetrated, a chance to align herself with a different kind of power. Meghan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She thought carefully about every word. Should she sound formal, regal, understated, or approachable, friendly, and charming? After all, she was no stranger to high-profile events. But this was Hollywood's inner sanctum, and it operated on a level where influence mattered as much as fame. She drafted, erased, and redrafted. Her message was polite, professional, and straightforward, a request to be considered for attendance. No demands, no brash claims, no sense of entitlement. Just a carefully written email that, in most worlds, would have been received without incident. But Hollywood is not most worlds. And Kris Jenner, powerful, perceptive, and notoriously selective about who enters her social orbit, was about to receive it. At the moment the email hit Kris's inbox, she was likely reviewing her calendar for the gala, coordinating VIP lists, managing last-minute seating arrangements, and making sure the event's glittering lineup was perfectly curated. Every attendee was strategically chosen. Every name on the guest list sent a message, subtle but unmistakable, about who belonged in this echelon and who didn't. For Kris, this wasn't about snubbing Meghan personally. It was about maintaining control, influence, and narrative. Every entry to the gala was a move on a chessboard, and Meghan's email was an unexpected, uninvited piece attempting to stake its place. The initial reaction in Kris's office was telling. Her assistants, trained to handle requests with both diplomacy and discretion, quickly recognized the sender. Meghan Markle, former royal, Hollywood figure, high-profile personality, and now, apparently, someone seeking access to a private event curated by Kris herself. There may have been a pause, a raised eyebrow, and then, inevitably, laughter, or at least a quiet, incredulous shake of the head. Because in Hollywood, the audacity of some requests is often matched only by the drama they ignite. Here's what makes this moment fascinating. Meghan's email, in isolation, was harmless. Polite, even. But in the context of Hollywood's power dynamics, context trumps content every time. Kris Jenner operates in a world where perception is reality, influence is currency, and control over access is a silent but potent weapon. By asking to attend, Meghan was unintentionally challenging Kris's authority. She was asserting her relevance, positioning herself as someone worthy of inclusion. And in Kris's carefully calibrated universe, that was a challenge to be addressed decisively. Inside Meghan's own world, the stakes felt very different. She imagined a polite response, perhaps a confirmation of attendance, or a courteous acknowledgement. She may have envisioned cameras capturing her elegance as she walked the red carpet, mingled with philanthropists, exchanged smiles with Hollywood's elite, and subtly reminded everyone of her unique blend of royal pedigree and modern celebrity. She couldn't have known that the narrative was already shifting behind the scenes, that whispers of her request were spreading faster than the speed of an email. Then, without warning, the first ripple of consequences appeared. Kris Jenner didn't simply ignore the email. That would have been too passive. Instead, she trashed it. Not in the sense of deleting it silently, but in the sense of a calculated, dismissive rejection that carried meaning far beyond words on a screen. The email was evaluated, assessed, and strategically dismissed. Every move was deliberate, sending a subtle but clear message. In this world, inclusion is earned on someone else's terms, and Meghan had not yet met those terms. The psychology of this interaction is critical. Imagine the power dynamic. On one side, Meghan, high-profile, ambitious, accustomed to commanding attention, used to influence by association. On the other side, Kris, orchestrator of Hollywood's inner circles, a master of social strategy, and an expert in narrative control. When these worlds collide, the result is never neutral. Every action, every choice, is amplified. And in this case, amplification meant that Meghan's email, intended as a polite request, became a catalyst for gossip, speculation, and behind-the-scenes drama that would dominate conversations before the gala even began. What makes this particularly fascinating is how ordinary the setup appears at first glance. It's just an email. But emails in high-stakes environments are not merely messages, they are tests. They are probes into existing hierarchies. They are signals, whether intended or not, about ambition, entitlement, and perceived worthiness. Meghan's email, by requesting access, sent a signal that she considered herself part of the elite conversation, part of the inner circle. And Kris Jenner, who thrives on control, couldn't allow that assumption to go unchallenged. The fallout was immediate, though invisible to the public at first. Internally, Kris likely called her team together, a small circle of trusted aides and PR strategists. They dissected the email, discussing tone, intent, and implications. Should the response be polite, pointed, or publicly visible? How would this rejection reflect on Kris herself? On the Gala's image? On the network of relationships she had painstakingly built? Every variable was considered, every potential outcome weighed. And the decision, Meghan's request would be rejected outright, decisively, and in a way that reinforced the hierarchy of influence. Meanwhile, Meghan was unaware of the forces mobilizing behind her request. In her mind, she had simply sent an email, a professional gesture, a polite reach across the divide. She could not have imagined that the reaction would be swift, strategic, and perhaps even a little ruthless. For the first time, she was confronting a truth that many high-profile figures discover only slowly, that in Hollywood, influence is not earned by fame alone, nor by prior accomplishment. Influence is maintained by gatekeepers, and if a gatekeeper decides you are not worthy, no amount of pedigree, charm, or renown can force entry. And yet, it is precisely this collision that makes the story so captivating. Meghan's email was a spark. Kris's reaction was the flame. And the fuel was the complex interplay of ambition, social hierarchy, and personal influence. What followed would not only reveal the depth of Kris's power, but also the limits of Meghan's reach in a world where perception is everything, and narrative control is the ultimate weapon. But the intrigue doesn't stop there. Beyond the immediate rejection, the email sparked a chain reaction that would touch multiple players in the celebrity ecosystem. Gossip columnists began circling, social media users speculated, and Hollywood insiders whispered. Memes, posts, and rumors began circulating with the speed and ferocity of wildfire. Meghan's simple email, sent in private confidence, was now public fodder, dissected, debated, and sensationalized. Every angle was examined, every motivation questioned, and with every passing moment, the stakes escalated. By the time Meghan even realized the email had been dismissed, the situation had already taken on a life of its own. The rejection was no longer a private matter. It was a signal, a story, a moment in a larger narrative that combined royalty, celebrity, ambition, and rivalry. And for Meghan, the lesson was immediate and stark. In Hollywood, no one controls access better than the gatekeepers, and challenging them, even unknowingly, carries consequences. So here we are, at the beginning of a story that started with a single email but became so much more. It's a tale of power, strategy, and social influence. A narrative about ambition, perception, and the subtle hierarchies that dictate who belongs where. It's a story that shows how a moment as small as a message can ignite drama, tension, and intrigue that ripple far beyond the sender and the recipient. And just when you think this is the end of the story, just when Meghan might have imagined a polite, unremarkable rejection, the next twist emerges. The email has set the stage for a confrontation, a social chess game, and a cascade of events that will leave both Meghan and Kris navigating a complex landscape of power, perception, and influence. What Meghan doesn't yet know is that the email she sent, meant to secure entry to an event, has already triggered forces she cannot control. Gossip is forming. Alliances are shifting. Public perception is in motion. And behind the scenes, Kris Jenner is orchestrating her next moves with precision, ensuring that the narrative will unfold exactly as she intends. The consequences of this single email will echo across social media, celebrity circles, and the gala itself. And as we move forward in this story, we will see how ambition, power, and influence collide, how reputations are built and broken, and how one email, seemingly insignificant, can become the catalyst for one of the most talked about celebrity moments of the year. Kris Jenner is a name that carries weight far beyond the reality TV screen. To the casual observer, She might appear simply as a matriarch of one of the most famous families in America. But beneath the surface lies a master strategist, a queen of influence, and a woman who has spent decades honing her ability to control narrative, manage perception, and wield power in both subtle and overt ways. Her empire is not built on happenstance. It's the product of careful planning, shrewd negotiation, and an unrelenting understanding of celebrity culture. To understand why Kris's reaction to Meghan Markle's email was so decisive, we first have to understand the scale of her influence. For over 3 decades, Kris has operated at the intersection of entertainment, fashion, and media. She has managed careers, launched businesses, and built networks that span the globe. Every decision she makes is deliberate, every interaction calculated. This is a woman who understands that in Hollywood, perception is everything, and influence is a currency more valuable than fame itself. Consider her role as the gatekeeper of her family's empire. Kim, Kourtney, Khloe, Kendall, and Kylie. Their careers, their public images, and their business ventures are all meticulously curated under Kris's guidance. Each red carpet appearance, each endorsement deal, each social media post is strategically aligned to maximize impact. Kris's approach is not reactive. It is proactive, anticipatory, and, at times, ruthless. She doesn't wait for opportunities to appear. She creates them, and she ensures that her family, and by extension, herself, remain at the epicenter of attention. Her influence extends far beyond her family, though. Kris Jenner's presence is a signal in itself. When she appears at an event, the guest list, the media coverage, and the conversations that follow are all subtly reshaped. She doesn't just attend events. She transforms them into opportunities to assert power, showcase alliances, and remind the world who controls access. It is this mastery of control that makes her rejection of Meghan Markle so significant. Let's put this in context. The L'Oréal Paris 20th Anniversary Women of Worth Gala is one of the most prestigious events in Hollywood, celebrating women who have made meaningful contributions in business, philanthropy, and entertainment. Attendance is carefully curated, and every invitation carries meaning. By controlling the guest list, Kris effectively dictates who is included in the conversation and who is excluded. To be denied entry is more than a rejection. It is a subtle statement about influence, relevance, and social positioning. Kris's power is amplified by her mastery of timing and narrative. In Hollywood, it's not enough to be talented or famous. You must also understand the optics of every move. Kris recognizes this better than almost anyone. She has built an empire where perception and reality are carefully aligned, and where control over who is seen and when is a key lever of influence. When Meghan's email arrived, it wasn't just a request, it was a challenge to this carefully maintained equilibrium. Inside Kris's inner circle, her decision-making process is both deliberate and strategic. Assistants, publicists, and event coordinators are trained to assess requests not only for their immediate content, but for their potential ripple effects. Who is the sender? What is their current public perception? How might this request affect other attendees? What message would granting or denying it send? By these criteria, Meghan Markle's request was analyzed not as an isolated message, but as a data point in a complex social calculus. It's also essential to understand Kris's psychological approach. She thrives on anticipation and control. She knows that influence is maintained not by passive authority, but by active curation. Inclusion is earned on her terms. Exclusion is a tool, a subtle but powerful way to maintain hierarchy and reinforce her own dominance. By trashing Meghan's email, Kris wasn't just rejecting a request. She was asserting her authority, sending a message that Hollywood's social structures operate according to her rules, not the ambitions of outsiders, no matter how famous they may be. There's an art to Kris Jenner's empire that is easy to underestimate if you only see the surface-level glamour of reality TV or red carpet events. It's an art that combines social intelligence, psychological insight, and a keen understanding of human behavior. She knows how to read ambition, detect overconfidence, and anticipate strategic moves. And perhaps most importantly, she understands leverage, the ability to use information, influence, and timing to control outcomes. Meghan's email, seemingly innocuous, was instantly evaluated against these criteria. The reaction was swift. Kris's inner circle, publicists, assistants, and close advisors, likely convened immediately to discuss strategy. They dissected the email, analyzed Meghan's intentions, and considered the optics of responding in various ways. Should they ignore it entirely? Should they respond politely but firmly? Or should they send a more pointed message that reinforces boundaries? In Hollywood, every choice carries consequences, and Kris was not about to leave this to chance. The decision was made, clear and deliberate. Meghan's request would be denied in a manner consistent with maintaining Kris's authority and control. What makes Kris Jenner especially formidable is that she combines strategy with instinct. She doesn't simply rely on procedure or precedent. She trusts her intuition, honed over decades of navigating celebrity culture. She knows which battles are worth fighting, which moves will resonate publicly, and which can be leveraged to further her influence. Meghan's email, innocuous though it may have seemed, represented a test, a subtle probe into the structure Kris controls. And Kris, true to form, responded with precision. This chapter of the story highlights a crucial point. Kris's empire is not just about fame or money. It is about the mechanics of influence. It is about understanding social hierarchies, managing perceptions, and strategically controlling access to events, networks, and opportunities. The rejection of Meghan Markle's request was not a personal vendetta. It was a calculated demonstration of power, a reminder that in Kris's world, inclusion is earned, not assumed. And yet, even within this empire of power, there is drama, unpredictability, and stakes that extend beyond the immediate interaction. The ripple effects of Kris's decision would spread far beyond the email itself, touching social media, celebrity gossip, public perception, and the broader narrative surrounding both women. It's a reminder that in Hollywood, every action has consequences, and the most seemingly minor moves can ignite outsized reactions. Imagine the tension behind the scenes at the gala. Every invitation, every name on the guest list is a statement. Kris Jenner's approval is a currency, a marker of relevance and influence. By denying Meghan entry, Kris effectively sent a silent, unmistakable message. This is not your world, not yet. The stakes were no longer about an email. They were about access, perception, and the subtle social hierarchies that define Hollywood elite circles. Kris's power also lies in her ability to control the narrative after the fact. While Meghan may have imagined the rejection as private, the reality is that Hollywood operates in public, and Kris is a master of leveraging even small actions for maximum effect. From selective leaks to strategic placement of information, every detail can be amplified. And in this case, the denial of Meghan's request would not remain a private matter for long. It would become fodder for gossip, speculation, and public debate. This brings us to an essential aspect of Kris's empire: her understanding of influence beyond immediate social interactions. Kris knows that public perception shapes opportunity. She understands that who is seen and who is excluded sends messages that ripple through networks, media, and celebrity culture. Meghan's email, therefore, was not just a private request. It was a potential disruption to a carefully maintained ecosystem. And Kris, with her mastery of influence, knew precisely how to address it. The more you examine it, the clearer it becomes. Kris Jenner's empire is built on strategy, intuition, and control. It is not simply fame or visibility. It is the ability to shape outcomes, dictate access, and manage perception with precision. Meghan Markle's email, seemingly innocuous, was an anomaly in this system. It was a challenge, intentional or not, and Kris responded with the decisiveness that has defined her career. And yet, even as Kris asserted her authority, the stage was being set for what would come next. The ripple effects of her rejection were only beginning. Gossip would spread. Social media would ignite. Hollywood insiders would speculate. And Meghan, despite her fame and experience, would realize that navigating this world requires more than reputation. It requires understanding the unspoken rules of influence, hierarchy, and narrative control. The power dynamic between Kris Jenner and Meghan Markle is a fascinating study. On one side, Meghan, confident, ambitious, accustomed to commanding attention, and experienced in managing public perception. On the other side, Kris, strategic, influential, and a master of narrative control. The collision of these two forces sets the stage for drama, tension, and intrigue that would reverberate far beyond a single email. And just when it seems the story has reached its peak, the next development would shock everyone involved. A move, a reaction, a ripple in Hollywood's social pond that nobody anticipated. Kris Jenner's empire is formidable, yes, but even the most powerful gatekeeper cannot predict every twist. And as Meghan navigates the fallout, the stakes will only escalate. Meghan Markle's journey into Hollywood has never been a casual stroll. From her early acting days to her marriage into the British royal family, she has always operated under intense scrutiny. Every move she makes is examined, dissected, and debated. And now, standing at the threshold of one of Hollywood's most exclusive events, the L'Oréal Paris 20th Anniversary Women of Worth Gala, she had to rely not only on her fame, but also on a carefully constructed strategy. Her Hollywood strategy was multifaceted, a combination of visibility, networking, and image management. She knew that being seen wasn't enough. She had to be positioned. She had to be relevant in the right circles, aligned with influential figures, and presented as both aspirational and approachable. In her mind, sending the email to Kris Jenner was a tactical move. A first step toward gaining access to a room filled with power players, philanthropists, and celebrities whose endorsement could amplify her influence. But Hollywood is a game of nuance, and Meghan's strategy, while logical from one perspective, underestimated the subtle hierarchies she was attempting to navigate. The world Kris Jenner controls is one where access is not granted based on fame alone. It's earned through a combination of social intelligence, timing, and understanding unspoken rules. Meghan's email, while perfectly polite and professional, failed to account for these invisible dynamics. In effect, her strategy was too straightforward for a world that rewards subtlety, calculated positioning, and the art of influence. Meghan's approach, however, was not without merit. She had built a persona that bridged worlds, royal sophistication meeting Hollywood charm. She understood the optics of image and reputation, knowing when to appear confident and when to exercise discretion. The gala represented an opportunity to cement that persona, to align herself with other influential women, and to project a version of herself that was as polished as it was powerful. From her perspective, the email was a logical step, a way to assert her relevance and signal her desire to participate in the social ecosystem of Hollywood elite events. Yet strategy is not only about ambition, it's about anticipating reactions. Meghan may have overestimated her ability to navigate Kris Jenner's world. She had faced intense public scrutiny as a royal, but the rules in Hollywood are different. In the kingdom of celebrity, influence is decentralized, and gatekeepers wield power quietly but effectively. Kris Jenner, in particular, operates with a mastery of social control that few can match. She understands the ripple effects of inclusion and exclusion, and she uses this knowledge to maintain dominance over networks, relationships, and perceptions. This is where Meghan's strategy collided with reality. The email she sent, intended as a polite request for access, was evaluated through the lens of influence, control, and hierarchy. Kris Jenner didn't just see a celebrity asking to attend an event. She saw an intrusion into a carefully maintained system, a challenge to her authority as a gatekeeper. Meghan's strategy, logical from her point of view, was interpreted differently by those who control access in Hollywood's inner circles. In response, Meghan had to pivot quickly. Strategy in Hollywood is never static. It requires adaptation, improvisation, and the ability to respond to unforeseen challenges. She could not simply rely on her previous fame or her royal pedigree. She had to reassess her approach, consider alternative avenues of influence, and find ways to navigate a social ecosystem that was complex, competitive, and unforgiving. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was slim. To understand Meghan's mindset, it's important to recognize her history with public perception. As a royal, she learned to manage the press, to craft her image, and to anticipate criticism. These skills were transferable to Hollywood, but they had limitations. The rules of the game were different. In Hollywood, influence is fluid, alliances are dynamic, and gatekeepers can be decisive. Meghan's strategy had to account for not only her intentions, but also the interpretations and responses of those who controlled access, like Kris Jenner. One critical element of her strategy was networking. Hollywood operates on connections as much as talent, and being present at the right events is crucial for building influence. The gala offered more than glamour. It offered strategic positioning. By attending, Meghan could interact with philanthropists, celebrities, and industry leaders whose recognition could bolster her relevance. The email was her first attempt at entering this network, a calculated risk intended to open doors that otherwise might remain closed. Yet the challenge wasn't just about gaining access. It was about perception. Hollywood is a world where optics matter more than reality. How you are perceived can influence opportunities, alliances, and public narratives. Meghan's strategy had to balance ambition with subtlety, assertiveness with tact. A misstep could be amplified, scrutinized, and interpreted as overreach. In this context, Kris Jenner's response was not only a rejection, but also a signal about the risks inherent in challenging Hollywood's social hierarchies. Despite the setback, Meghan's strategy included contingency plans. She was accustomed to navigating obstacles, and her approach was not solely dependent on Kris Jenner's approval. She had networks, media influence, and public attention at her disposal. She could pivot, leverage other relationships, and attempt alternative avenues of entry or visibility. But even with these options, the email rejection carried symbolic weight. It was a public reminder of the invisible rules governing elite access, a lesson in the subtle power of gatekeepers. The psychological dimension of her strategy is equally significant. Meghan is a figure accustomed to scrutiny, rejection, and the complex interplay between personal ambition and public perception. Her approach to the gala was informed not only by practical considerations, but also by the emotional stakes. Acceptance would validate her presence in Hollywood's inner circles. Rejection, however, could trigger self-doubt, media speculation, and public judgment. In crafting her strategy, Meghan had to navigate both the tactical and the emotional terrain, balancing confidence with the potential for public exposure. As the days following the email unfolded, Meghan's strategy began to encounter friction. Reports of gossip, speculation, and insider commentary began circulating. Social media users dissected her attempt to gain entry. Industry insiders whispered about the implications. Even before she had a chance to respond, the narrative was being shaped by external forces beyond her control. This is the reality of Hollywood strategy. Success depends not only on intention, but also on timing, perception, and the reactions of those who hold influence. One of the most critical lessons in this saga is that Hollywood strategy is multidimensional. It involves more than just reaching out, showing up, or having a compelling resume. It requires anticipating power dynamics, understanding unspoken hierarchies, and predicting responses from gatekeepers. Meghan's email was a calculated move, but it underestimated the depth of Kris Jenner's influence and the subtleties of her control over social access. And yet, Meghan was not entirely unprepared for conflict. Her strategy included mechanisms for damage control, for leveraging media attention, and for asserting relevance even in the face of rejection. She could frame narratives, highlight charitable contributions, and emphasize her broader influence. But even these maneuvers had limitations. In Hollywood, control of narrative often rests in the hands of those who manage access and perception, not those who simply seek it. The collision of Meghan's strategy with Kris Jenner's power is a masterclass in social dynamics. On one hand, ambition meets opportunity. On the other, gatekeepers enforce boundaries and signal hierarchy. The interplay between these forces generates drama, tension, and intrigue, a combination that captivates both industry insiders and the public alike. Meghan's email was the spark. Kris's rejection was the response that escalated the stakes. This chapter underscores a crucial truth about Hollywood strategy. It is never solely about intention. It is about anticipation, interpretation, and the ability to navigate complex social ecosystems. Meghan's approach was logical, methodical, and calculated, but it encountered forces that she had not fully accounted for. The result was a scenario that combined ambition, rejection, and the power dynamics of one of Hollywood's most influential gatekeepers. And just when it seems that Meghan's strategy might falter entirely, the next twist emerges. There are subtle maneuvers, behind-the-scenes interactions, and reactions that nobody could have anticipated. These moves will test not only her strategy, but also her understanding of Hollywood's complex social hierarchies. The consequences will ripple far beyond the email itself, impacting perception, alliances, and the unfolding narrative of the gala. In Hollywood, no action exists in isolation. Every decision, every move, every word has a ripple effect that travels far beyond the immediate moment. Meghan Markle's email, polite and professional though it was, had already landed in Kris Jenner's hands, and from there, it began to circulate within a highly calibrated network, the inner circle of Hollywood power, gossip, and influence. This inner circle, composed of publicists, assistants, strategists, and media insiders, operates with precision, anticipation, and, often, ruthless efficiency. When Kris Jenner dismissed Meghan's email, the response didn't stay private. It was dissected, analyzed, debated. The question circulating among her closest aides was straightforward. What does this mean for the gala? What does this mean for our networks? And, unspoken but implicit, how do we leverage this situation to assert authority and control the narrative? In Hollywood, even minor conflicts become opportunities for influence, and Kris's inner circle understood this instinctively. The reaction inside Kris's team was immediate and intense. Emails flew between her assistants and event coordinators. Phones rang. Whispered conversations in quiet offices dissected Meghan's intentions, her tone, and the potential consequences of either granting or denying her access. Every word of her email was scrutinized. Was this a bold move or an innocent request? Was it a test of power or a simple plea for inclusion? In Hollywood, the answer is rarely as simple as it seems. Meanwhile, the network of gossip, agents, stylists, PR professionals began to stir. Hollywood operates in an ecosystem where information is currency and secrets or insights are highly valued. Meghan's request, seemingly ordinary, was now a story in the making. The inner circle knew that word of this exchange could create waves. It could influence perceptions, affect alliances, and subtly shift the balance of power. And in true Hollywood fashion, they began to plan how best to manage those waves. Inside Kris Jenner's inner circle, the first step was to ensure alignment. Every team member had to understand the stakes and the strategy. Granting Meghan access could appear weak, suggest that the gala was negotiable, or send a message that Kris's authority could be challenged. Denying her access, however, would reinforce boundaries, assert control, and signal that influence must be earned. The team quickly agreed. Exclusion, managed carefully, was the only viable choice. Yet, Hollywood is never simple. Even a rejection must be handled with narrative finesse. A dismissive response, poorly timed or misinterpreted, could provoke backlash or negative publicity. The inner circle had to consider all angles. How would the media interpret this? Would Meghan use social channels to frame herself as the aggrieved party? Could this rejection inadvertently generate attention that elevates Meghan's profile in a way that undermines Kris's authority? Every scenario had to be assessed and mitigated. The inner circle's reaction illustrates a key principle in Hollywood. Gatekeepers are as much managers of narrative as they are of access. Kris Jenner's team didn't merely reject Meghan. They controlled the framing of that rejection, ensuring it aligned with broader strategic objectives. Hollywood operates on perception, and perception is carefully cultivated by those who understand influence at its deepest levels. In this ecosystem, every email, every phone call, every public appearance is a calculated move in a complex social chess game. As the inner circle worked behind the scenes, whispers began to spread among other Hollywood insiders. The email was no longer private. Stylists, agents, and event consultants speculated about Meghan's intentions and Kris's response. Social media platforms, though unaware of the full story at the time, would soon amplify these whispers into a storm. By the time Meghan realized the breadth of the reaction, the situation had already taken on a life of its own. This reaction from Kris Jenner's team also highlights the power of alliances. Hollywood's inner circle is built on networks of loyalty, mutual benefit, and shared influence. By aligning behind Kris, Her team reinforced the idea that the decision was not merely personal, it was structural. Influence is maintained through cohesion, and the inner circle's unified response sent a clear signal to the broader network. Access is controlled, hierarchy matters, and challenges to authority are not tolerated lightly. Meanwhile, Meghan's network, agents, PR advisors, and celebrity friends, began to sense that something was amiss. While she awaited a response, the silence or eventual dismissal of her email was interpreted through a prism of uncertainty. Hollywood's inner circles are opaque and strategic. Often, one does not know the full scope of influence or the unseen calculations until the consequences emerge publicly. For Meghan, this was the first hint that the world she thought she understood operated on rules that were invisible yet formidable. Another factor in the inner circle's reaction was timing. Hollywood thrives on momentum. Information, gossip, and narrative must be carefully managed to control the story. The rejection of Meghan's email was not only about denying access, it was about controlling the timing of exposure. By carefully managing how, when, and through whom information leaked, Kris's team could shape public perception, protect the Gala's image, and reinforce the hierarchy of influence. In Hollywood, timing is as critical as the decision itself. The emotional dynamics within the inner circle are also noteworthy. Kris's assistants and advisors are not merely professional functionaries. They are stakeholders in her power and reputation. Each member understands that success or failure reflects on their ability to anticipate, influence, and maintain control. When Meghan's email arrived, it became a test for the team as well. How effectively they managed the situation would reflect on their competence, their loyalty, and their understanding of Hollywood's complex social ecosystem. At the same time, the inner circle had to anticipate Meghan's potential reactions. Rejection in Hollywood can provoke a range of responses: public complaints, social media framing, strategic alliances, or even attempts to circumvent gatekeepers. Kris's team had to consider these possibilities and prepare contingencies. The goal was not just to reject the email, but to maintain control over the narrative in the aftermath, ensuring that any fallout reinforced Kris's authority rather than undermined it. The ripple effects of the inner circle's actions were immediate. Within hours, speculation began to surface among media insiders and gossip columnists. Social media chatter hinted at tension, while Hollywood's who's in, who's out dynamic made the email and its rejection a story ripe for analysis. Even without official confirmation, the mere knowledge that Meghan's request had been dismissed created intrigue, tension, and anticipation, a trifecta of elements that fuels Hollywood narratives and keeps audiences captivated. This chapter underscores a fundamental truth about Hollywood. Power operates not only through visibility, but through networks, influence, and control over access. The inner circle's reaction to Meghan's email illustrates how decisions are rarely isolated events. They are part of an ecosystem where information is managed, narratives are shaped, and influence is wielded with precision. Every rejection, every approval, every comment is a calculated move in a broader social strategy. And just when it seems that the inner circle has sealed the outcome, the story is far from over. Meghan, skilled, ambitious, and accustomed to navigating scrutiny, is not likely to remain passive. She has allies, resources, and an understanding of media dynamics that can disrupt the carefully maintained narrative. The next moves will test not only her strategy, but also Kris Jenner's ability to maintain control in a landscape where influence is contested and perception is paramount. Hollywood moves fast, but gossip moves faster. What began as a private interaction, a single email sent by Meghan Markle to Kris Jenner, quickly evolved into a public narrative that captivated the attention of fans, media outlets, and industry insiders alike. In the digital age, the ripple effects of a single email can travel across the world in seconds, and Meghan's request, combined with Kris's decisive dismissal, became fodder for speculation, commentary, and viral intrigue. The first signs of the public fallout were subtle. Industry insiders began whispering, sharing the story in private chats and exclusive newsletters. Stylists, agents, and PR professionals speculated about Meghan's intentions and Kris's response. Was this a simple oversight or a calculated snub? How would Hollywood perceive Meghan's reach and influence? Even without official confirmation, the rumor mill was already spinning, fueled by curiosity, intrigue, and the allure of celebrity drama. Social media, however, was where the story truly ignited. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok amplified the situation at an unprecedented speed. Fans and critics alike began discussing the email, analyzing Meghan's motives, speculating about Kris's decision, and debating who held the upper hand. Hashtags appeared, trending topics emerged, and online discourse quickly spiraled into a mix of admiration, judgment, and schadenfreude. In an era where perception drives opportunity, the public fallout was as significant as the private rejection itself. Journalists and gossip columnists picked up on the whispers, adding layers of narrative that transformed a private interaction into a public spectacle. Headlines hinted at tension, snubs, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Articles posed questions that begged answers. Why was Meghan Markle denied entry to the L'Oreal Gala? Kris Jenner's power play. Did she just shut Meghan out? The questions themselves fueled curiosity, creating a feedback loop that amplified the story and ensured it would reach audiences far beyond Hollywood insiders. The emotional intensity of the public fallout cannot be underestimated. Fans of Meghan Markle expressed outrage, framing the rejection as an injustice, while others interpreted it as a sign that even celebrity status has limits in Hollywood's tightly controlled social hierarchies. Meanwhile, supporters of Kris Jenner lauded her decisiveness, emphasizing the importance of gatekeepers in maintaining order and influence. Across social media, commentary varied, but one thing was clear: the story had captured public imagination. Meanwhile, the narrative was further complicated by the ambiguity of online speculation. In Hollywood, perception is often more influential than reality, and the public rarely has access to the full context. Observers could see the email or hear rumors of the rejection, but they could not fully understand the motivations, strategy, and dynamics at play. This ambiguity created fertile ground for gossip, analysis, and sensationalism, a perfect storm that heightened tension and kept audiences engaged. Meghan herself was aware, at some level, that the email's dismissal would not remain private. Hollywood insiders are constantly under scrutiny, and she had experienced public fallout before. But even she may have underestimated the scale and speed of the response. Within hours of the email being rejected, rumors began circulating, commentary emerged, and social media discussions multiplied. What began as a private request was now a public conversation, and Meghan had to respond strategically to protect her image, maintain relevance, and navigate the increasingly complex social landscape. The public fallout also highlighted the role of gatekeepers in shaping perception. Kris Jenner's decision to dismiss Meghan's email was amplified not only by the story itself, but also by the network of influence surrounding her. Her inner circle ensured that the narrative reinforced her authority, while subtly framing the rejection as an assertion of control rather than personal animosity. In Hollywood, controlling the narrative is as critical as controlling access, and Kris's team executed this with precision. One of the most fascinating aspects of the fallout was the interplay between traditional media and social media. Print and online outlets covered the story with analysis, speculation, and insider commentary, while social media users debated, shared, and amplified the narrative in real time. Memes, posts, and videos quickly emerged, some critical of Meghan, some critical of Kris, and others highlighting the drama with humor and irony. The story became a multi-layered spectacle, demonstrating the speed and complexity of modern celebrity dynamics. For Meghan, the public fallout presented both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, she faced scrutiny, judgment, and criticism, risks inherent in high-profile interactions. On the other hand, the attention also elevated her relevance, kept her in public discourse, and provided an opening to reframe the narrative on her terms. In Hollywood, the ability to manage public perception is a critical component of strategy, and Meghan's next moves would determine whether she could turn this controversy into an advantage or allow it to define her negatively. The emotional stakes were high. Social media commentary, fan reactions, and media speculation created pressure, uncertainty, and even tension within Meghan's team. Every post, every article, and every rumor became a potential pivot point for narrative management. The public fallout was not simply a byproduct of the email. It was a force to be reckoned with, capable of shaping perception, influencing alliances, and affecting future opportunities. Meanwhile, Hollywood insiders watched closely. The rejection and subsequent public speculation created a dynamic that was both unpredictable and strategically significant. Agents, managers, and PR professionals assessed the situation, evaluating potential alliances, positioning strategies, and ways to leverage the unfolding narrative. In a world where perception is power, the public fallout itself became a tool, a signal of influence, and a test of both Meghan's and Kris's ability to control the story. The cascading effects of the public fallout also included shifts in alliances and perception. Other celebrities, philanthropists, and industry leaders who were invited to the gala began forming opinions based on the emerging narrative. Social dynamics shifted subtly as individuals considered where they stood in relation to Kris's authority and Meghan's public image. In Hollywood, perception is often more important than reality, and the email rejection had already begun to influence networks, behaviors, and social positioning. As the story spread, it became clear that the public fallout would not remain a fleeting incident. This was the kind of drama that resonates with audiences: ambition, gatekeepers, rejection, and the clash of influence. The narrative contained tension, emotional stakes, and intrigue, elements that captivate public attention and drive discussion long after the initial event. And yet, the most dramatic twist was still to come. As Meghan navigated the fallout, unexpected developments began to emerge. Media coverage intensified, social media speculation reached a fever pitch, and insiders hinted at private maneuvers behind the scenes. The stage was being set for a confrontation, a turning point, and a public spectacle that would escalate the stakes even further. The public fallout had begun innocuously, with a single email and a calculated dismissal, but it was now evolving into a complex web of perception, strategy, and influence. Hollywood thrives on this tension, and the story was far from over. In Hollywood, a private email can quickly become public spectacle. Meghan Markle's dismissed request to attend the L'Oréal Paris 20th Anniversary Women of Worth Gala had already sparked whispers among insiders. But the moment it leaked, or even hinted at, to journalists and social media, the story exploded. The media frenzy and social media storm that followed were immediate, relentless, and unpredictable, illustrating the high-stakes world of celebrity influence and narrative control. The first signs of the media frenzy appeared in gossip columns and online news outlets. Headlines splashed phrases like "Kris Jenner snubs Meghan Markle" and "email rejection sparks Hollywood drama." Though the coverage was brief at first, it carried the unmistakable tone of scandal. A powerful matriarch asserting control over the guest list, and a high-profile outsider challenging the established hierarchy. Every detail, from Meghan's phrasing in the email to Kris's supposedly cold response, was dissected, analyzed, and amplified. The media frenzy was fueled not only by curiosity, but also by the inherent drama of Hollywood power dynamics. The clash between Meghan Markle, the former royal navigating celebrity circles, and Kris Jenner, the gatekeeping matriarch of Hollywood royalty, created a narrative that was irresistible. It combined ambition, rejection, hierarchy, and personal stakes, the perfect ingredients for storytelling that captivates audiences. Journalists knew the story would generate clicks, engagement, and heated discussion, and they delivered accordingly. But it wasn't just traditional media that drove the storm. Social media platforms transformed the incident into a viral phenomenon. Twitter threads exploded with commentary, fan pages on Instagram posted screenshots and analyses, and TikTok users began creating short, dramatic videos dramatizing the email rejection. Memes emerged almost instantly, some mocking Meghan, others emphasizing Kris Jenner's power, and still others framing the situation as a dramatic lesson in Hollywood hierarchy. Within hours, the story had reached millions of people worldwide, generating conversations that extended far beyond the gala itself. The speed of the social media storm magnified its intensity. What might have remained a discreet rejection within Hollywood's inner circles became a global spectacle. Fans, critics, and casual observers weighed in, sharing opinions, speculating about motives, and debating who held the upper hand. This instantaneous amplification demonstrates a fundamental truth about celebrity culture today. Information travels at lightning speed, and public perception can be shaped almost as quickly as the events themselves unfold. For Meghan Markle, this media frenzy posed both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, the constant attention increased pressure, scrutiny, and potential judgment. Every post, every rumor, and every commentary piece could affect her reputation, her public image, and her ability to navigate Hollywood networks. On the other hand, visibility, even in controversy, can enhance relevance, maintain influence, and provide opportunities for narrative management. Meghan's team had to act quickly, balancing defense, strategy, and public messaging in the face of a storm they could neither fully predict nor control. Kris Jenner, by contrast, appeared to thrive in this environment. Her dismissal of Meghan's email had been deliberate, calculated, and precise, and now the media frenzy only reinforced her authority. The story emphasized her role as a gatekeeper, a woman whose approval is necessary to gain access to Hollywood's most exclusive circles. Her inner circle worked to manage the narrative, ensuring that coverage framed the rejection as strategic, controlled, and aligned with her long-standing role in shaping the entertainment landscape. The dynamics of the social media storm reveal an important element of modern celebrity. Perception is as influential as reality. Meghan's email, once private, became a symbol. Some framed her as an ambitious outsider testing boundaries. Others saw her as audacious or even presumptuous. Similarly, Kris Jenner's role was magnified. She became a figure representing authority, strategic acumen, and the subtle power that gatekeepers wield. The story no longer hinged solely on the email itself. It was now about perception, optics, and narrative control. One of the most fascinating aspects of the media frenzy was the way different audiences interpreted the same events in dramatically different ways. Fans of Meghan highlighted ambition, resilience, and the audacity to challenge Hollywood norms. Critics emphasized overreach, entitlement, or a failure to understand social hierarchies. Supporters of Kris Jenner praised her decisiveness, her mastery of influence, and her ability to maintain order in a world driven by perception and access. The story became a mirror reflecting the biases, allegiances, and values of its audience, which only heightened its viral potential. Meanwhile, the emotional stakes were palpable. Social media commenters expressed outrage, empathy, or amusement, creating an environment where every detail, real or speculative, was analyzed.